Hello everyone. I just wanted to do this quick video for a couple of reasons. Some of you had some good questions during class today, so I just wanted to answer some of those questions, give you some tips on how to go about writing the DBQ, how it'll work on Tuesday and Wednesday, and of course, if you were absent, this could also be really helpful so you get a sense of some of the instructions that were given out today. So a few things. A DBQ is basically a document-based question. Sometimes in a history course, you might be given like 4 or 5 smaller documents and you're asked to work with them to craft an open-ended response or something like that. This DBQ is structured along those lines, but the format of our DBQ is going to be a 5-paragraph essay. So essentially this is an in-class essay. Imagine that you're given a series of prompts tomorrow in class. You're going to pick one of the prompts and you're going to answer one of the prompts, and your goal is to write a 5-paragraph essay. You can use a variety of sources. You can use the McKay text, your benchmark, class notes, the PowerPoint, things that you researched in order to understand your character. So you want to use a particular example of a person and some of the things that they did. You can certainly do all that. You're also asked to incorporate a few excerpts from a larger DBQ packet. So even though you could write this essay without the DBQ evidence, part of the challenge is to incorporate some of the DBQ evidence. This is kind of a thinking activity. It makes your brain work really hard to make connections between things that you feel like you already have at your fingertips and then also some new information. The prompt will ask you to build an argument in the form of a thesis statement, and then you'll also be asked to prove, or to prove isn't really the right word, argue the thesis statement in the form of paragraphs. So look at each paragraph, and the goal of each paragraph is to take on a point that supports your thesis. The DBQ question will include sources for you to consider, so this is where you get those DBQ excerpts. And if you were in class today, you spent some time looking at the DBQ excerpts and writing on them, you'll get that packet back in class tomorrow. You'll also get a chance to, I'll send you the packet if you were absent today, so that way you can look at it before class tomorrow. And then, you can, of course, at home, even if you don't have your packet, but you want to use the Copernicus information, you can look at the McKay text. You can do some background context reading in some of the textbook stuff, or you can look up some information specifically on something like Copernicus or Leonardo or whatever. Take some notes on that, and that's something that you can also use. So there's no shortage of things that you can use. The info about the DBQ, you will have these sources ahead of time, so everybody by tonight should get the DBQ packet. When you're reading over those sources, you're looking to do a few things. One is trying to understand the source and, know that some of them are really hard. A lot of you ask good questions about vocab words. Some of the reading is very difficult. That you're looking to also maybe look up some things about the sources, especially those sources where there's an image or a painting. It's almost impossible to look at a small little, Xerox copy of a painting and make heads or tails out of it, but you're allowed to look up the painter, who's Peter Bruegel, who's Brunelleschi, what are some things that these particular people are responsible for, what can you find out about the painting or about the dome in Florence, and you can refer to these sources. You do not need to use a very specific example like Brunelleschi's dome. You might refer to Brunelleschi, the way in which he did his research, how he used classical architecture, things like that. So you can do some background research and note some of the examples in your essay. You're looking to use about 5 sources, so there's a lot of info in that packet. Again, some of it you may just completely skip because it doesn't necessarily serve your purpose. Some of the sources, the last 3 or 4, are a little bit more critical of Burckhardt's argument. So if you're looking for sources for that part of the argument, if you're looking for sources that maybe are more likely to defend, or at least possibly defend, Burkhart's argument. Maybe the first half of the DBQ packet gives you that. I do recommend bucketing some of the sources. In other words, make some connections between sources. So maybe there's 2 or 3 sources that focus on education, and that becomes like a paragraph. Maybe there's 2 or 3 sources that seem to support Burkhart's argument and 1 that doesn't, and so you're starting to see things differently in the sources. You can kind of imagine like piles of sources. That's what we mean by bucketing the sources. You will not see the question till tomorrow, but again, you can kind of predict what some of the question will be. You can use those additional sources, your Renaissance benchmark, and we'll get to technology use. I think that was the top question I got all day long, was how and when you might be able to use your computers. You'll pose your argument in a 5-paragraph essay format. There is a DBQ rubric. If you were absent today, it's under the assignment for the DBQ. Note that you're handing in the first part of this assignment after class on Wednesday, and it will be a draft. It may be incomplete. That's totally fine. A note on that in a little bit. Some recommendations for you as you write. Try not to just list topics. This is not necessarily like a quiz answer, you know, in one of those open-ended responses where your goal is to kind of put down everything you know about a topic, right? Just to say, oh, I read this and this is everything I know about, you know, the Renaissance or whatever. You're really looking to creatively craft an argument, which means you're going to have a thesis statement and you're going to have some paragraph points. The very first day of the essay writing on Tuesday, it's a half day, you might find it beneficial to work on an outline for yourself. So that's recommended. If you have that, you can kind of take some of the notebook paper and organize your paragraphs like on various pieces of notebook paper. You know, that's a possibility. You do not need to start with your intro. If that works for you, by all means do that. But some students will like to work on their body paragraphs and then their, intro paragraph. That's totally fine. When you cite sources, for our purposes for the draft, you do not need to do a works cited page or have a bibliography at the end, but you should cite your sources in the text. You can use parentheticals at the end, so you could just be like, you know, Erasmus or something like that. Some of my work on the DBQ packet needs to be more clear for you so that you can do that. You know, just kind of make it so that I know who you're talking about. The easiest way to do this will be not necessarily parentheticals, but just to note the name of the author and the work in your text, okay? So we'll give you an example of that. You can use any sources you want, but you're looking to have references or specific discussions about at least 5 of the DBQ sources. You want to have your paragraphs so that you have like a little road sign at the beginning of the paragraph for your reader, telling your reader what the paragraph is going to be about. It can be an argumentative statement that is something you have to work hard to persuade your reader, and that's why you're using evidence to kind of make your case. So think of each body paragraph as kind of a part of a larger case. So if I was trying to convince administration to let us have a half day for the eclipse today, maybe the first point might be like, you know, this is a scientific phenomenon that becomes really important. Maybe a second point might be something like, you know, it could be dangerous driving home in the timing of the eclipse, or, you know, stuff like that. So each topic sentence or each paragraph is kind of like a sub part of your larger thesis. You want to include some basic background in your intro paragraph. That may be less of a focus for the draft, but that's something that your essay will ultimately have. And an example of how you might cite your sources, if you were to say something like, in Praise of Folly, Desiderius Erasmus suggested that blah, 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 blah. You could quote, you could paraphrase, but that would be what's in quotes there is just like my version of a sentence. You do not need to put parentheticals at the end of this unless you got that quote or that paraphrase from another source, in which case, but because you're looking at excerpts, this would be totally fine. Just that alone would be fine for the citation. A couple of things that you can do on Tuesday night, Monday night. You can look over your benchmark. You can use the source packet to prepare for the DBQ. I have your source packets, and I'll continue to hold on to your DBQ packets. You'll use them in class, and then you'll turn them in. But you can use the McKay text. You can use some of the handouts. I'll make sure tonight that all of the Schoology materials for class Renaissance folder is very complete. There is a chapter on the Middle Ages as well as on the Renaissance. You're welcome to use any content in either one of those. Remember, it's not a quiz, so you can ask a question, you can tell me you don't understand something, and I'll help you out. Send me an email, I'll help you out, and during class I'll get back to you. You may also, use any other sources, but do cite them. So if you use like Britannica for, who Erasmus is and a little bit about him, maybe you add some background to Copernicus, who he was and what he was involved in, what he said to, what he argued about Ptolemy's model, whatever. You can just cite, cite your source, and that's fine. You can use all of that. And the last thing, so I'll kind of just note a few things. The due date for the draft essay is Wednesday at the end of class. The date for the final is actually going to be delayed by a little bit, because when you hand in your Wednesday draft, I will give it some feedback. I'll get it back to you, and then you're going to work on your draft, which will be done completely at home. The rubric that I have given out in class, and it's also on Schoology, the areas of the rubric that we want to focus on for the draft include the following. You should focus on organization. How can you clearly articulate an organized essay, even if it is incomplete? Is it organized? A thesis statement, you want to spend a little bit of time crafting a thesis argument. That is like the glue that's going to create your essay, the purpose in a sense for writing your essays, to discuss your thesis statement with your reader. And you want to have a clear argument, so use simple language. You don't have to be really big words in your language. You can be very simple and focus on some of the meaning of what you're saying, and also make it as narrow as possible. You want to have a few reasons that maybe justify a particular take on Burckhardt's argument. Maybe you're going to focus particularly on Renaissance art or on Renaissance education, or you might do something about the role of humanism and how it was maybe really a game changer in education and in literature, and perhaps in even areas of what becomes kind of modern day science. You could go in that direction. You also want to focus on aligning your main points so that your body paragraphs connect to a larger thesis. Your body paragraphs are using rich evidence, so this is the focus on the DBQ packet plus other information. You can have access to all those materials during class. The more you have tackled some of it ahead of time, the easier the task is of kind of merging some ideas together. Your paragraph should be comprehensive. That's something that'll get some attention, likely, between the draft and the final. The same thing with analysis. Evidence is analyzed. What you're looking to do in each paragraph, each of your body paragraphs, once you have like a paragraph point, you're using multiple sources of evidence. Can you write a whole paragraph that focuses on Erasmus? You can. Can you write a whole paragraph that focuses on the way that humanism recreated goals for education? You can. You could use Erasmus as an example in that kind of paragraph. You could use that whole thing about the books and or Cassandra Fedeli's piece and literature. You could use a few things together. you want to have a few different pieces of evidence in each of your paragraphs. It doesn't necessarily have to be DBQ evidence, but some type of citable evidence. We cite a lot in history. And you do want to make some connections. So where something is familiar in one source, maybe you connect it to another source. Maybe a source that we read in class is connecting to this other source. Maybe, you know, your person, you were Copernicus, or you were Brunelleschi, you want to connect something to that. You know, you can do a lot of interesting things. And you want to make sure that you're making an argument to connect evidence to your topic sentence. So the evidence isn't just listed, like here's an example, here's an example, here's an example. You want to really have to work hard to share with your reader how did you use evidence to actually arrive at the point you're making in the paragraph, okay? And again, these are aspects of the DBQ rubric that we're interested in, less interested in the well-written grammatical errors, some of the background information in the intro. You know, I would focus more on your body paragraphs and your thesis statement. That's kind of where your draft should focus. It's going to be messy. It could be a little bit, you know, cross outs and, you know, things like that. Totally fine. Okay, so totally fine. Focus on these elements. That's quite a bit, okay, for a draft. And know that, you know, time in class goes really quickly. I'm understanding of that. Okay, be well. I will see you tomorrow.